On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Ben Rothke. He is the Senior Information Security Manager at Tapad. We're going to be talking about burnout and hiring in the cybersecurity space. They kind of go hand in hand, and I think Ben has some interesting points that we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about the shortage in the industry, making security more, approachable for others to get into. I'm excited to have Ben on, so thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let's start off right at the top to understand two things. One, what does Tapad do? And then I know your title is Senior Information Security Manager, but just let us know what some of your responsibilities are.
Yeah. So, Tapad's in the ad tech space, has an identity resolution targeted to large digital advertisers, those with, six-figure and above advertising who are looking to do a better job of, targeting people to get them, what they want to see. So Tapad solution is unique in the field. And so, I manage information security. So responsible for, cloud security, compliance, since we're ingesting, massive amounts of data from our customers. They want to make sure it's done in a safe manner and that all aspects of privacy are taken care of.
Awesome. And then, information security manager, you covered some broad areas. What falls in your lap there?
Yeah, anything related to security, privacy, risk, vendor management, from that end. A lot of different things.
Yeah, I like it. We're gonna get this podcast kicked off here, and we're talking about two different, I guess, topics, but they kind of interrelate. We're talking about hiring and burnout. I think they go hand in hand. I think we'll start off talking about some of the burnout that exists within cybersecurity, and kind of get your views on that, and then move into hiring. So, you've been in security for a while. And you've seen different aspects, different size companies. I guess when we talk about burnout, a lot of that relates to resource constraint, and obviously people, doing too much, being stressful in general. When we talk about burnout, what are some of those aspects? If you're a cybersecurity professional, you're in the industry, and we're talking about burnout from the outside, what does that look like?
It's not really unique to information security. There was a fascinating New York Times article in September about Dr. Kimberly Becker, a medical doctor. She worked in West Virginia. So I in the New York City area, and within 10 miles, there's 50 hospitals, of which, many of them are world-class hospitals. So she went to rural West Virginia. She was the only doctor. And, in the end, I think at about age 45, she had to stop because just to her own health reasons, she was, highly constrained. A lot of her patients, didn't have insurance. So she burnt out, quite easily. At a high level, it's not tied to information security, but more specifically information security, there is a shortage of security people. So in a lot of organizations, they're doing the jobs of, two people. And, pretty much everyone, everyone's a team player. You have a job and you're going to give it all you can. And, people don't mind, going the extra mile for a week or two. Maybe it's, during an audit or it's a peak period. But when you have to, keep giving 110%, 150%, month, quarter after quarter, year after year, that's a perfect storm for burnout. And companies are losing, good people, because of that.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you brought up, basically the example from the doctor. And we're talking about any time when we're asking people to do more, and you can't hire more sometimes, right? It's difficult. And that is putting stress on the existing team. When you kind of look at the industry and you look at, the burnout, and obviously, it's not unique to information security, it exists in other disciplines as well. And people are doing the job of more than one person. When you kind of look at that and you look at, how to deal with it, and maybe it's your, from your personal experience, how can you deal with that? Because obviously, the work has to get done. You feel a sense of ownership, especially in security. You feel even a greater sense of ownership because you feel like you're there at the wall. So how do you deal with kind of balancing and making sure that we don't get to the burnout stage?
Clearly, management needs to understand it and, ensure, they don't burn out their employees. But at the end of the day, we're all responsible, for ourselves. A person needs to understand, what their limitations are, and needs to keep their physical health, their mental health in check, in order. And I said people can, go in overdrive for a while, but, using an analogy of a jet airliner, they take off, the engines are at 100%. But if you listen, you'll hear maybe after, 3-4 minutes, they pull the engines back to maybe 80%, because even though these are high performance engines, they're meant to work at 80%, and they're only going to work at 100% for, short amounts of time. And so people have to, use that analogy, is make sure they do not, burn themselves out, know what they could handle. As it is, skipping lunch every now and then is fine. But if person's, working so hard, they don't even have time for lunch, that is going to affect them physically. It's going to impair their thinking abilities. And it's sort of those type of, markers which really indicate a much bigger problem. But at the end of the day, everyone has to look out for themselves and know where they're holding. And if they start, getting, feel, burnout, coming on, that's when you sort of need to take action, even physically, as the person has a slight pain, you're going to take action. But, if the pain is that bad for days on end, by the time they, get to their physician, there could be a, significant long-term damage that is irreversible.
I guess as a manager, when you're, looking after your staff, obviously you mentioned you have to know what you have to handle as the person sitting in the job, know your limits, know your capacity. You don't want to burn out. Obviously, no one really does, but you get deep into the job and you feel that sense of ownership you're trying to deliver. As a manager, what are you looking for? So if you're looking at your staff, you're looking at your team, what are signs that, hey, this person's just, obviously said, skipping lunch. Now in the Zoom remote world, we can't see, what people do with that additional time. How do you keep an eye on your team?
One thing is a good manager, needs to be attuned to how you could see those things. Even with, physicians, they look, not just at what the patient says is, but their overall demeanor and those things. And, sometimes employees will be upfront and say, hey, it's too much for me. It's, I can't do it. I need a break. But there is a large population of employees that, won't be as upfront with that and won't let you know that. But, managers have to be, realistic, knowing once again, it's like a horse, it's like a jet, you could put it at 100%, but you need to know, when to pull back to 80%. And, you have to be realistic is, what people can do and, how much you're, overloading, them, et cetera. And, I'm a former pilot. I like aviation. So I always find aviation analogies is that, if you overload a plane, it's not going to take off. And if you try to take it off, there'll be terrible consequences. 20 years ago or so, there was a singer, Aaliyah. They overloaded the plane and, 10 people perished. And it's the same thing as if you're overloading them and you're not cognizant of what's going on, the repercussions are significant. As I said, is with aviation and physics, it's very easy to see the repercussions. As this plane tried to take off, physics is unforgiving. The plane crashed. Physics is relatively easy. It's very easy to measure, but that's always the challenge of burnout. You can't measure it in the same way you could, measure your tank and know you've got half a tank or you're going, 50 miles an hour. And that is the challenge. This is a big HR issue. And, hopefully in an organization, HR is attuned to it. They work with management. So in a well-functional organization, these are not such an issue. In dysfunctional organizations, of which there's too many, this can become a significant issue and the employees suffer.
And that's actually a very good point. And I think I like the airplane analogies. I think that's really very apt. What's interesting is obviously, even with the airline, obviously that, we're seeing the shortage of people. Pilots have always talked about, being stressed. They have their own burnout and obviously issues to deal with. And within cybersecurity, we're always talking about burnout. And then we're talking about, well, there's a shortage of people. We can't hire people to help staff out. And what's interesting to me is, we see these numbers of 2 million plus, 3 million plus, employee, cybersecurity professionals needed. But yet sometimes when I look at it and I'm talking to cybersecurity, executives and leaders, it seems like there's a very distinct focus on hiring, maybe from a much smaller pool. There's a ton of roles open, but there's only, let's say, a couple 100,000. I don't know what the number is. I'm making it up, but there's a small subset of actual qualified senior level people that everyone wants. And then obviously there's 10, 15 jobs, so you can't even grow your team. This shortage, obviously, we're not going to come up with a solution on this episode, but this shortage and the burnout go hand in hand. And on the flip side, when I talk to people, people think of cybersecurity as something really complicated, something, a little bit out of reach. It's, stigma of Hollywood and, a bunch of hackers pounding on keyboards to be their image of what cybersecurity is, to even approach the industry. And I don't know, from my point of view, I think that is a problem of making the job more approachable so we can address some of that shortage.
I think, there's a lot of articles out there, and the popular media talks about 3 million, 4 million open security jobs. And if you do some simple math, it would mean that, 1% of the US population works in information security. So a lot of the numbers, I think, are completely, don't mimic reality. Is there a shortage? Definitely so. Is the shortage that drastic? Not really. There's shortages in a lot of industries, from jet mechanics to dermatologists. I've written about this, and a good chunk of the reason companies can't find security people is because they're simply not paying salaries commensurate with what the industry is demanding. And I get numerous emails on LinkedIn about jobs, and I reply and say, I know people looking, what's the salary? And often it's, they want someone with 10 plus years of experience, secret clearance, blah blah blah, $110,000. And I'm saying, that's not what the market rate is. And companies that are willing to pay market rates, they find people. It's hard to find good people in areas, certain things like cloud security engineers, secure application development. The pool, right away is a smaller pool. But once again, it's companies that are paying, market rates can find people. When we talk about security, it's a massive field, from software development, administration, analysis, management, etc. So there's only one area where a person has to be extraordinarily smart. And that's, I think, in those who are like working, writing encryption, cryptography, algorithms, and, doing that area. But, to work in security, you don't have to be, any smarter than in any other area of IT. I mean, obviously, the smarter that you are, the better. But if a person is not an Einstein, they shouldn't say, security is not for me. Yeah, I mean, Hollywood always does things wrong in a nutshell because, if you go into corporate American information security, it can be boring. You're in long meetings, you're looking at, audit logs, and it's not like, exciting hackers and like they make it. But once again, Hollywood is about entertainment, not about a reality. I mean, even something as simple, there's the show, House MD is, extraordinarily entertaining, but, he'd last an hour in any hospital in America today. I mean, maybe 2 days, but, that just simply wouldn't go. I mean, even something as simple as in-house, the doctors do everything, while in most hospitals, the nurses do everything. Anything you see in Hollywood about computer security is, just is not accurate. So with that, security needs a specific skill set, but a person doesn't, I can speak for myself, I'm not brilliant. You don't have to be brilliant to succeed in the industry. So that shouldn't, keep people away. You have to like it. You have to have an interest in it. And that's true for, once again, anything you do, whether you're a heart surgeon, a mechanic, an airline pilot, whatever it is. If a person doesn't like what they're doing, you're not going to succeed. And, you're going to burn out at age 23 rather than age, 73. So if a person, finds security interesting, and once again, this thing we call security is so broad. SANS Institute has a career mat, and, there's a lot of different career paths. But if a person has an interest in security, I'd say, that initial drive and curiosity is, could be 75% of it. And then, their own educational pursuits, and add another 25%. A lot of security is learning on the job, because even if someone graduates with a bachelor's degree, even with a specialty in information security, security in 2022 is different than security 2018.
Sure.
Which is going to be different from security in 2026. So that's one thing also, is that you need to have an interest in it, because you always have to be learning. Because if you just sort of, stay static, the world's changing, IT is changing drastically. And, for some people, they don't like IT in general and security specifically because it is changing so fast, in the sense is that they just don't like that. They want a career which is more static, and that's fine. But once again, if a person has that skill set, that temperament, that personality, it's a great career field.
I think some of those are great points. And to kind of touch on a few, I mean, it is interesting. Like, some of the things you mentioned, cybersecurity, some of the more technical roles, you need some time. Like, doing cybersecurity architecture or cloud security architecture means you need some fundamentals of IC, more junior level work to build up. So that's a time. We need people. It's fairly new, so you can only have so much experience. There's only so many people that kind of migrated onto cloud security architecture, for instance. I think a lot of the other roles you mentioned, some of them have more of a business facing priority, and I think those are interesting roles that people don't view as the core cybersecurity. Talk about compliance risk, where you don't have to be overly technical, but maybe an interest in technology. And I think, I talk to a lot of people in the data science field, and I always, bring the observation that I see a lot of diversity in data science. And it's interesting to me because you see, people gravitate towards it because, they think the numbers are interesting, or they want to, get into the data side. And obviously it's a skill they can learn. With security, you would think that it has some of those attributes that people see on the data science side in the different functions, right? There's a ton of functions we're talking about here in cybersecurity. I would imagine it would be a very good magnet for diverse candidates that maybe are looking at data science to kind of go, hey, I can find something of similar interest in the security world.
It is a mosaic with a lot of room for growth. One thing I like to add also is that security is sort of, should we say, an add-on to information technology in general. And there's these tech courses out there. They say they could prepare you for a career in security in 90 days. But with that is a person really needs to know the fundamentals of information technology, how networks work, IP addressing, and 20, 30, 40, 50 other things, software development. And once a person has that understanding, then you could start working on, how do you secure those things? But if a person sort of just jumps into security and they don't have that, that overall context, they're missing something there. In the same way in the medical field is, if physicians go do a basic residency, and then they'll have, fellowships and specialties in, cardiology, nephrology, dermatology, etc. But, they have to do those prerequisites within that internal specialty, and then they go on to that. And so too with information security, really is you need those fundamentals of IT, and then you add on security.
I think that's a great analogy. Those building blocks and some of the security programs you see out there. You see that within the engineering space as well. People go to boot camp thinking they're going to come out with a job, and they do. I mean, it works out, but it's not exactly the one-to-one that you're going to come out as a engineer. You still probably need some more work experience. You need some more exposure to kind of build out your skill set, and then obviously a couple years later you look back and it doesn't matter where the training came from. I think I'm hoping what we're going to see is more people kind of see, hey, there's this shortage everyone talks about, and go, hey, that might be an interesting area for me to get into because it's less crowded and obviously decent paying jobs, high demand, and goes back to the burnout where if we have more professionals, you can, add more people to the team. And it seems like it's going to go hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, I said there's definitely, as current trends grow, it's a great career path. Anyone who's looking to get in it, there's a good book out there by Helen Patton called Navigating the Cybersecurity Career Path, Insider Advice for Navigating Your First Gig to the C-Suite. And, she lays it out what it really takes to, get into security. Because even if you walk through an airport, you see these signs, as I said, enter the security career field in 6 months, high paying job. And so obviously these technical institutes, have an interest in, making claims like that. But, the question is, are these people finding jobs? Anyone considering, going into security should definitely get Helen's book. I think it's like, $20 to get some, really good advice on how to do it. Because it's a wide open field, but it's, companies are not just hiring people because they have a pulse. And, people are graduating these programs and finding, the floodgates of jobs are not there. So it's those type of books and speaking to people who are in the trenches will give you a realistic view as opposed to, watching the next hacker movie.
Absolutely. Ben, I appreciate it, man. That obviously, very wide area of topics. I think you did a great job kind of bringing some visibility. I love the examples, by the way. I'm a big analogy guy, so I love the medical and the aeronautics examples. So thank you for that. I asked every guest this question. I want to see what you would say. If you could ask a future guest that comes on the show to talk about a topic or answer a specific question, what would you like to hear about?
Well, Einstein always tried to have a, unified field theory. But I think, within IT, how do we unify it all is because, there's more tools, more everything. And it seems like IT is getting more complex, not easier. So, what's the way to really simplify things?
I like that, actually. I hadn't heard that before, but I'm a big believer of that. And as the complexity is growing and the skill set complexity is growing, it's becoming a challenge. So that's actually a really good one. If somebody wants to reach out to you to talk to you about security or anything you mentioned on the podcast, what's a good way of getting in contact with you? I know obviously a lot of people like LinkedIn, but is there a preference that you have?
I have a simple website, rothke.com, rothke.com. You could go there, LinkedIn, reach out to me there. Could give you my PayPal address also. That's a great way to reach me.
I love it. We'll definitely include some of those links in the show notes so people can chat with you. Ben, thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, Ben's topic is very interesting about simplifying IT and technology, more tools, more everything. How do you keep things simple? If you have any experience or views on that, reach out to me. I'd love to have you on the show. Secondly, if you find the podcast interesting, please share it with others. That's how we've been growing. Drop a review, add a rating to whatever your favorite platform is. That helps the podcast grow. Can't thank you enough. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.